somewhere beyond the quiet endings of forgotten days. There is a shoreline where no waves ever rush, a place where moonlight lingers a little longer, where every gentle current carries something precious, and where countless paper boats drift silently beneath an endless sky. Some boats carry words that were never spoken. Some carry gratitude that arrived too late. Some carry hope quietly folded into blank pages, trusting that kindness will understand what ink never could. Tonight, Elias is invited to follow one small paper boat toward a sea unlike any he has ever imagined. A place where every peaceful voyage reminds us that the gentlest things we release into the world often travel farther than we ever will. Welcome to Sleep with Stories, where every journey is lovingly crafted to quiet busy thoughts, soften tired hearts, and gently carry you toward peaceful sleep. If these quiet journeys bring a little peace to your evenings, you can help keep Elias and the hidden library alive by simply liking this story, sharing your thoughts in the comments, and subscribing to join our growing family of travelers. Every small act of support helps another kind soul discover these quiet journeys and keeps the lanterns glowing for everyone still waiting to find their way home. Now, leave the weight of today behind. Allow your breathing to slow. Let every thought become as light as folded paper, and together, let us quietly follow the first little boat as it begins its peaceful journey across the sea of paper boats, somewhere beyond the quiet endings of forgotten days. There is a shoreline where no waves ever rush, a place where moonlight lingers a little longer, where every gentle current carries something precious, and where countless paper boats drift silently beneath an endless sky. Some boats carry words that were never spoken. Some carry gratitude that arrived too late. Some carry hope quietly folded into blank pages, trusting that kindness will understand what ink never could. Tonight, Elias is invited to follow one small paper boat toward a sea unlike any he has ever imagined. A place where every peaceful voyage reminds us that the gentlest things we release into the world often travel farther than we ever will. Welcome to Sleep with Stories, where every journey is lovingly crafted to quiet busy thoughts, soften tired hearts, and gently carry you toward peaceful sleep. If these quiet journeys bring a little peace to your evenings, you can help keep Elias and the hidden library alive by simply liking this story, sharing your thoughts in the comments, and subscribing to join our growing family of travelers. Every small act of support helps another kind soul discover these quiet journeys and keeps the lanterns glowing for everyone still waiting to find their way home. Now, leave the weight of today behind. Allow your breathing to slow. Let every thought become as light as folded paper, and together let us quietly follow the first little boat as it begins its peaceful journey across the sea of paper boats. The little paper boat arrived just before midnight. It drifted silently across the polished wooden floor of the hidden library, as though the marble itself had become a quiet river beneath the moonlight. There was no breeze to carry it. No footsteps echoed through the endless halls. Only the soft whisper of folded paper gliding peacefully through perfect stillness. Elias slowly lifted his eyes from the open book resting upon his lap. For a few quiet moments, he simply watched. The tiny boat carried no lantern, no glowing crystal, no familiar seal from any place he had visited before. It was beautifully ordinary, folded from soft ivory paper that had gently aged with time. Its delicate edges were slightly worn, as though it had already traveled farther than anyone could imagine. Beside him, the blossom lantern shimmered with a warm golden glow, not brightly, only enough to gently whisper, "Pay attention." The little paper boat drifted closer until it came to rest beside his chair. Then it waited, perfectly still, almost as though it had finally reached the traveler it had been searching for. Elias quietly set his book aside and knelt beside it. He did not reach for it immediately. The hidden library had taught him many gentle lessons over the past few journeys. One of the most precious was this: not every invitation wished to be opened at once. Some simply wished to be noticed. A peaceful smile found its way across his face as he admired the tiny folds. Someone had shaped this little vessel with extraordinary care. Each delicate crease rested exactly where it belonged. No hurried hands had folded it. Someone, long ago, had taken their time, perhaps with hope, perhaps with love. The silence around him seemed to grow even softer. High above, endless shelves disappeared into warm shadows where sleeping stories rested beneath quiet lantern light. Somewhere deep within the library, an unseen clock gently welcomed another peaceful hour. The little paper boat remained exactly where it was, waiting. Elias smiled to himself. "I think," he whispered softly, "you've come a very long way." Almost immediately, the blossom lantern answered. One tiny golden blossom slowly unfolded along its silver branch. A ribbon of warm light drifted gracefully into the air, not toward the little boat, but toward one of the library's oldest windows, overlooking the endless night beyond. Curious, Elias slowly raised his eyes. Outside, the moon shone brighter than he had ever remembered. Its silver light stretched peacefully across a distant sea that had never appeared beyond the hidden library before. A sea unlike any river or ocean he had ever known. Its waters shimmered beneath countless stars. At first, he thought they were only reflections upon the gentle waves. Then, his eyes slowly adjusted. The lights were moving. Thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands, of tiny glowing shapes drifted peacefully across the moonlit water. Small, delicate, patient. Paper boats, endless paper boats, floating together beneath the silent stars. Elias remained beside the window for a long while. The library had shown him many extraordinary places, gardens where forgotten dreams quietly bloomed, rivers where lanterns carried gentle hopes into the night, rooms where time itself seemed to breathe more slowly. Yet this felt different. Nothing upon the distant water seemed to be waiting for him. The sea simply existed, patiently, peacefully, as though it had been flowing long before stories were ever written. The little paper boat still rested beside his chair. Without thinking, Elias picked it up with both hands. It weighed almost nothing. The paper felt surprisingly warm, as though it had quietly held moonlight for many years. He turned it over with great care. No name, no symbol, no message, only beautifully folded paper. For a brief moment, he wondered whether there had once been words written upon it, words that time had slowly carried away. The thought did not make him feel sad. Instead, it filled him with an unexpected sense of peace. Perhaps some kindnesses did not need to be remembered in order to remain real. The blossom lantern glowed again, its warm light gently reflected across the tiny folds of the boat. And for the smallest instant, Elias thought he saw faint silver lines appear across the paper. Not letters, not drawings, only soft, shimmering paths, like tiny rivers quietly finding their way home. Just as quickly, they disappeared. He smiled. "I wasn't meant to read them," he whispered, "and that's all right." The library had never been a place that answered every question. It simply offered enough wonder for the heart to keep walking. Outside the great window, another paper boat slowly drifted across the endless sea. Then another, and another. Each one moved at its own gentle pace. None hurried to catch another. None competed for the moonlight. Some floated close together before peacefully drifting apart. Others traveled alone for what seemed like endless miles. Yet somehow, none of them ever looked lonely. Elias rested one hand lightly against the cool glass. "So many journeys," he murmured, and every one of them feels peaceful. A familiar voice answered softly behind him, because none of them are trying to arrive too quickly. Elias turned. Aria stood quietly beneath the warm lantern light. She wore her familiar silver blue traveling cloak, tiny stars embroidered delicately along its edges. Her gentle smile carried the calm warmth of someone greeting an old friend, rather than arriving unexpectedly. For a few peaceful moments, neither of them spoke. Together, they simply looked out across the endless sea of drifting paper boats. Sometimes, shared silence was the kindest conversation of all. Aria was the first to look away from the sea. Her eyes settled gently upon the tiny paper boat resting in Elias's hands. "So," she said softly, "it found you." Elias lowered his gaze to the little boat once again. "You knew it was coming." A quiet smile touched her lips. "I hoped it would." He looked at her with gentle curiosity. "You've been here before." It wasn't a question. Aria nodded. "Only once." The answer carried no mystery, only memory. She stepped closer to the great window, where moonlight wrapped itself around the peaceful folds of her silver blue cloak. The sea of paper boats isn't a place that appears because someone searches for it. Her voice became almost as quiet as the drifting water beyond the glass. It appears when someone is finally ready to understand why certain things were never meant to be held forever. Elias listened without interrupting. Over many journeys, he had learned that Aria never spoke in riddles. She simply chose her words carefully, allowing every thought enough room to breathe before another arrived. His eyes wandered back toward the endless water. Thousands of glowing boats continued their slow voyage beneath the moon. Some were no larger than a child's hands. Others looked almost large enough for someone to gently sit inside. Each drifted with the same peaceful certainty. None seemed lost. None seemed hurried. "They're beautiful," Elias whispered. "They are, but," he continued thoughtfully, "where are they going?" Aria followed the quiet procession with her eyes. "I don't know." The answer surprised him. She noticed the question upon his face and smiled, and neither does anyone else. For a few moments, only silence remained between them. Not an uncomfortable silence, the kind that allows thoughts to settle naturally. Finally, Aria spoke again. "Every traveler believes the boats are carrying something different. Some believe they carry forgotten wishes. Others believe they carry gratitude that was never spoken aloud. Some think they simply carry hope, folded carefully enough that it never sinks." Elias looked down at the tiny boat resting safely in his hands. "And what do you believe?" Aria's smile grew softer still. I stopped trying to decide. She watched another small paper boat drift peacefully across the moonlit water. I think some journeys become more beautiful the moment we stop needing every answer. The blossom lantern answered with a quiet pulse of golden light. Its glow reflected gently across the little paper boat until, for the briefest heartbeat, it seemed almost ready to sail once more. Neither of them noticed it at first. The little paper boat had begun to move again, not across the floor, but within Elias's hands. It rocked ever so gently, as though responding to a tide too quiet for anyone else to hear. Elias looked down. "I didn't move." "I know," Elara replied softly. The tiny vessel slowly turned until its pointed bow faced the great moonlit window. Then it became still once more. Elias's expression warmed with quiet recognition. It isn't asking us to stay. It's inviting us to follow. For a moment, Elias simply held the little boat close, feeling its delicate folds beneath his fingertips. It was remarkable how something so light could carry such quiet certainty. He carefully placed it upon the wide stone windowsill. Almost immediately, the little boat drifted forward by itself. There was no wind, no flowing water, only moonlight. When its tiny bow touched the glass, the window shimmered. Silver ripples spread slowly across its surface, as though the ancient glass had become perfectly calm water. Beyond it, the endless sea grew brighter. The countless paper boats seemed to welcome the soft glow without changing their peaceful rhythm. The blossom lantern brightened beside Elias. Its warm golden light blended with the moonlight until neither seemed brighter than the other. The two lights simply belonged together. Elara quietly stepped beside him. Every sea has its shoreline. She smiled gently, but not every shoreline belongs to the same world. The silver ripples continued spreading across the window. Slowly, very slowly, the glass became transparent, not like ordinary glass. It simply disappeared. Cool night air drifted into the library. It carried no salt, no storm, only the faint fragrance of fresh paper, wildflowers, and rain that had fallen somewhere very far away. Elias took one slow breath. The air itself felt peaceful, as though every traveler who had ever stood upon that distant shore had left behind only kindness. Far below, the sea stretched farther than the eye could follow. Millions of glowing paper boats drifted beneath the stars. Some moved alone, others gathered for a while before quietly continuing their separate journeys. None ever collided. None ever became lost. Every tiny voyage seemed to understand exactly where it belonged. Then, something appeared along the distant shoreline. A narrow wooden pier, simple, beautifully weathered, waiting beneath rows of softly glowing lanterns. At its very end, a single empty boat rested quietly against the dock. Its polished wood reflected both moonlight and lantern light with equal warmth. No ropes held it in place. No oars rested inside. It waited with the same peaceful patience as the little paper boat that had found Elias only moments before. For several quiet moments, neither Elias nor Area moved. The little paper boat rested peacefully upon the windowsill. Beyond it, the empty boat continued waiting at the end of the moonlit pier. No voice called to them. No sign welcomed them. No promise was made. The invitation was gentle enough that it could still be refused. Elias found himself smiling. The hidden library never seems to hurry anyone. Area quietly shook her head. It never has. It simply opens a door and patiently waits until someone is ready to walk through it. The blossom lantern glowed with quiet approval. Its golden light gently illuminated the ancient stone beneath their feet. Then, another blossom slowly unfolded, not quickly, not dramatically, simply one soft petal at a time. Elias noticed it immediately. It only blooms when we're meant to continue. Area smiled. I think it's learning your footsteps. The words settled warmly inside his heart, not because the lantern had become familiar, but because the library itself no longer felt unfamiliar. When he had first arrived, every doorway had seemed impossible. Every destination had felt beyond understanding. Now, he no longer searched for explanations before taking the first step. Wonder itself had become enough. Outside, one of the distant paper boats drifted quietly away from the great sea. Instead of continuing with the others, it slowly approached the wooden pier. Without making a sound, it came to rest beside the waiting boat. Then, its gentle golden light faded, not into darkness, into peace, almost as though its journey had quietly reached exactly where it belonged. Elias watched without speaking. There was no sadness in what he had witnessed, only completion. Some journeys ended, not because they had run out of distance, but because they had finally arrived where kindness had always been leading them. The little paper boat upon the windowsill gave one final gentle sway. Then, without anyone touching it, it floated slowly into the open night. It crossed the space between the library and the waiting boat below with effortless grace. As softly as a falling feather, it settled inside the empty vessel. Nothing else happened. The boat did not sail away. The sea did not change. It simply waited, patiently, as though one traveler was still missing. Aria looked toward Elias. Her gentle smile held neither excitement nor urgency, only quiet certainty. "I think," she whispered, "it's time we followed the first little boat." The blossom lantern glowed warmly between them. Together, they stepped through the moonlit window and onto the peaceful shore of the sea of paper boats. The shoreline welcomed them without a single sound. No waves rushed to greet the land. No tide rose or fell. The sea simply breathed, slowly, peacefully, as though every gentle movement had learned the patience of the moon itself. Elias stepped onto the pale silver sand. It felt neither warm nor cool beneath his boots. Instead, it carried the quiet softness of paper that had rested safely inside an old book for many years. He looked back. The moonlit window of the hidden library still shimmered quietly behind them. It remained open, not as an exit, but as a comforting reminder that home never truly disappeared. Aria noticed him looking. The library never closes its doors. She smiled gently. It simply waits until we're ready to return. Ahead of them, the narrow wooden pier stretched peacefully across the still water. The empty boat rested exactly where they had seen it from the library window. Its polished cedar wood glowed softly beneath the moonlight, each graceful curve reflecting tiny stars dancing across the calm sea. There were no ropes, no anchor, no sail, only a single lantern resting quietly at its bow. Unlike the blossom lantern, this one held no flame. Its glass remained perfectly clear, waiting. The little paper boat floated gently inside the vessel. It rested near the lantern, as though the two had always belonged together. Elias stepped closer. "So this is the invitation." Aria nodded. "I think it's also the guide." Without another word, the little paper boat slowly turned upon the wooden floor of the vessel. Its tiny bow now pointed toward the endless sea. Not hurriedly, not dramatically, simply, with quiet certainty. Elias couldn't help but smile. "It already knows where we're going." "I don't think it does." Aria's answer came almost as softly as the windless night. "I think it simply trusts the journey." For a moment, those words settled inside Elias more deeply than he expected. Trust the journey. The hidden library had never asked him to know every destination. It had only asked him to take the next gentle step. Perhaps this sea would ask the very same thing. Together, they stepped aboard. The boat welcomed their weight with only the faintest ripple beneath its polished hull. Then, without sail, without oars, and without anyone giving direction. It quietly drifted away from the pier. Behind them, the lanterns along the shoreline grew smaller with every peaceful moment. Ahead, the endless sea of paper boats slowly opened beneath the silver moon. And for the first time, Elias realized something that had escaped him from the library window. There were far more paper boats than he had imagined. Not thousands, not hundreds of thousands. They stretched beyond every horizon, their gentle golden lights flowing together like an endless constellation that had chosen to rest upon the sea instead of the sky. The little boat continued its peaceful journey. No ripple spread behind it. No wake disturbed the moonlit sea. It seemed to glide upon light itself, as though the water welcomed every gentle movement before it even arrived. Elias rested one hand lightly against the smooth wooden rail. For a long while, he simply watched the endless procession surrounding them. Paper boats drifted in every direction. Some crossed paths for only a few quiet moments before continuing toward different horizons. Others floated side by side for what seemed like miles, their tiny lanterns glowing together like old friends enjoying a peaceful walk beneath the stars. Not one boat seemed hurried. Not one appeared uncertain. The entire sea moved with a quiet confidence that asked nothing and feared nothing. "It feels alive," Elias whispered. Aria nodded. "I think it is." He looked toward her. "You mean the sea?" She smiled softly. "The journeys." Her answer settled gently between them. The sea simply carries them. Elias allowed himself to think about that. Perhaps places were not remembered because of where they stood. Perhaps they were remembered because of the journeys they quietly carried. The blossom lantern shimmered with warm approval. Its golden reflection danced gently across the polished wood beneath their feet. Just then, something unusual caught Elias's eye. A paper boat slowly drifted toward them from the opposite direction. Unlike the countless others, this one carried a single white flower. Its petals glowed faintly beneath the moon. The little vessel passed only a few feet away, neither slowing nor changing course. It simply continued its peaceful voyage. Soon another appeared. This one carried a tiny silver bell. It never rang. It only rested quietly inside the folded paper. Then came another. Inside rested a smooth river stone, small enough to fit comfortably within a child's hand. Another carried a single feather. Another, a tiny acorn. Another, a pressed violet flower whose delicate color had somehow remained untouched by time. Elias watched them pass one after another, Each boat carried something different, yet none carried more than a single precious thing. He smiled. They're all protecting something. Aria's eyes followed another tiny vessel drifting beneath the moonlight. Perhaps, she paused gently, or perhaps they are simply remembering. Silence returned, not empty silence, but the kind that quietly invited the heart to notice what words often hurried past. Far above, the stars reflected so perfectly upon the still water that the horizon slowly disappeared. For one breathtaking moment, Elias could no longer tell where the sky ended and where the sea of paper boats began. It felt as though they were sailing between two endless oceans, one above and one below. Then, the little paper boat leading them gently changed direction, not sharply, only enough to guide the wooden boat toward a place where the moonlight seemed brighter than anywhere else upon the sea. In the distance, soft shapes slowly began to emerge from the silver mist. Not islands, not ships, something altogether different, something waiting quietly, just beyond the reach of the moonlight. The silver mist welcomed them without hiding the way. Instead, it softened everything. The moon became gentler. The stars seemed closer. Even the quiet glow of the countless paper boats surrounding them appeared warmer, as though every light had wrapped itself in peaceful silence. The little paper boat continued leading the way, never stopping, never hesitating, only drifting with the quiet confidence of something that had crossed this sea many times before. Elias found himself breathing more slowly, not because he was trying to, but because the sea itself seemed to invite every heartbeat into its own gentle rhythm. Ahead, the mysterious shapes slowly revealed themselves. They were not islands, nor were they buildings. They were enormous floating lilies, hundreds of them. Each blossom rested peacefully upon the still water, their wide silver-white petals opening beneath the moonlight like tiny floating gardens. Between them drifted thousands of paper boats. Some quietly passed through the flowers. Others rested beside them for a little while before continuing their peaceful voyage. The sight was almost impossible to describe. It felt less like discovering a place and more like remembering a dream that had quietly waited somewhere inside the heart. Elias smiled without realizing it. I've never seen flowers grow on the sea. Aria looked toward the nearest blossom. They don't. He glanced at her. They only bloom when enough journeys pass beside them. Her answer carried no attempt to explain, only gentle observation. Elias watched more carefully as another small paper boat drifted past one of the lilies. Its petals slowly opened a little farther, not dramatically, only enough to welcome a little more moonlight. A second boat followed. Another petal unfolded, then another. It was almost as though every peaceful journey helped the flower become just a little more complete. The blossom lantern glowed softly, its warm light reflected upon the nearest blossom, until tiny golden sparkles danced across its silver petals. "They are beautiful," Elias whispered. "They are grateful." Aria's quiet reply carried the same calm certainty as the sea itself. "They bloom because every traveler leaves behind a little kindness." For a long moment, Elias said nothing. He simply watched another paper boat drift quietly between the blossoms. Perhaps kindness never truly disappeared. Perhaps it simply became part of places we had not yet discovered. A gentle sound floated across the water, so soft that Elias almost believed he had imagined it. He listened again. There it was, a faint, musical whisper, not singing, not voices, almost like hundreds of tiny paper folds brushing together beneath the moonlight. The sound rose, then faded once more. "What is that?" Elias asked. Aria tilted her head, listening with the same peaceful attention. A warm smile slowly appeared. "I think," she whispered, "the sea is saying welcome." The little boat drifted onward, leaving the floating lilies peacefully behind. Their silver blossoms slowly disappeared into the gentle mist until they looked like tiny stars resting upon the sea. The musical whisper faded with them. Soon, only silence remained once more. Not empty silence, the kind that seemed to wrap itself gently around every thought, until even curiosity became peaceful. Elias looked across the endless water. Something about the sea of paper boats felt strangely familiar, not because he had ever stood here before, but because nothing here seemed afraid of time. The paper boats never hurried. The flowers never rushed to bloom. Even the moon seemed content to remain exactly where it was. He smiled to himself. So many journeys, and no one seems worried about arriving. Aria looked toward the horizon, where countless tiny lights continued drifting beneath the stars. "Perhaps," she said softly, "because this sea has never measured a journey by how quickly it ends." Elias allowed those words to settle. How often, he wondered, had people believed that reaching the destination was the most important part. Yet here, every paper boat seemed to understand something entirely different. The voyage itself was already enough. Just then, the little paper boat guiding them slowed, not stopping, only slowing enough for Elias to notice something resting quietly upon the water ahead. It was another paper boat, smaller than most. Its folded paper had faded almost completely white with age. Unlike every other vessel they had passed, this one carried nothing inside. No flower, no feather, no lantern, no tiny keepsake, only stillness as their boat drifted gently beside it. The old paper boat quietly turned once upon the water, almost as though acknowledging their presence. Then, without a single ripple, it slowly unfolded. Its delicate sides opened one careful fold at a time, until the tiny boat became a perfectly flat sheet of paper, floating peacefully upon the sea. Elias watched in complete silence. The paper remained untouched by the water. Not a single corner became wet. Moonlight rested softly across its smooth surface, completely blank. There were no words, no drawing, no message waiting to be read. Only a clean white page beneath the stars. For a moment, Elias wondered whether the sea had washed the words away. Aria gently shook her head before he could even ask. It was always blank. He looked at her, then, why did it make the journey? A quiet smile appeared upon her face. Perhaps, she answered, because not every act of hope begins with knowing what to say. The blank page rested peacefully upon the water for another quiet moment. Then, a gentle breeze arrived, the first breeze they had felt since leaving the hidden library, soft enough to move only a single sheet of paper. Slowly, almost playfully, the blank page folded itself once again. One fold, then another, until the little paper boat quietly returned and continued its endless voyage beneath the moon. The little boat drifted peacefully ahead once more. Nothing about its journey had changed. Yet, something inside Elias quietly had. He could not explain why. Watching the blank page fold itself into a little boat again had stirred a gentle thought deep within him. Perhaps hope did not begin when we finally found the right words. Perhaps it began much earlier, the moment we chose not to close our hearts. The blossom lantern glowed softly beside him, its warm golden light reflected across the still water, until it seemed almost impossible to tell where the lantern ended and where the moonlight began. The endless sea stretched quietly in every direction. Millions of paper boats continued their patient voyage beneath the stars, each one carrying its own quiet purpose. Some carried flowers, some carried tiny keepsakes, some carried nothing at all. Yet somehow, every single one belonged. Elias rested both hands upon the smooth wooden rail. I don't think the sea is asking anyone to be perfect. Aria looked toward him. No, it never has. She smiled gently. It only asks each traveler to continue floating. Those simple words settled peacefully inside him. How many people, he wondered, spent their lives believing they needed to become complete before beginning the journey? Yet this sea seemed to whisper something entirely different. Begin just as you are. The journey itself will quietly shape the rest. For several peaceful minutes, they said nothing more. The little wooden boat continued gliding through the moonlit water with effortless grace. Tiny paper boats passed silently on every side, some close enough that Elias could see the delicate texture of their folded paper. Others shimmered like distant stars upon the horizon. Then, something unusual caught Aria's attention. She slowly raised one hand. Elias. He followed her gaze. Far ahead, the countless paper boats were no longer drifting in random directions. Very gradually, almost too gently to notice, they were beginning to gather, not because anyone guided them, not because a current pulled them. One by one, they quietly turned toward the same distant place. Thousands, then tens of thousands, their warm golden lights slowly forming graceful rivers across the endless sea. From above, they must have looked like glowing constellations, gently flowing over moonlit water. The little paper boat, leading Elias, drifted toward those living rivers of light without hesitation. It had already chosen its path. The wooden boat followed. As they drew nearer, the sea itself seemed to become brighter, not from the moon, but from the quiet glow of countless little journeys finding one another. In the far distance, something immense slowly began to emerge from the silver mist. Not a mountain, not an island, not another shoreline, only the faint outline of something so beautiful that neither Elias nor Aria found any words worthy enough to speak. They simply watched as the sea gently carried them closer. They did not reach it quickly. The sea of paper boats never hurried anyone toward wonder. Instead, the beautiful shape upon the horizon slowly revealed itself, one quiet detail at a time. First, they saw light, not bright light, gentle light. Thousands of tiny lanterns floated peacefully above the water, like golden fireflies resting beneath the stars. Then they noticed graceful wooden bridges suspended just above the sea, not connected to land, simply floating, curving softly through the moonlit mist before disappearing once again. Paper boats drifted beneath them in endless silence. Some continued onward without slowing. Others paused beneath the lanterns, for a little while before quietly resuming their journeys. Nothing here seemed commanded. Everything simply belonged. The wooden boat carrying Elias and Elias slowed almost imperceptibly. Its movement became softer, more careful, as though even it wished to avoid disturbing the peaceful place ahead. The little paper boat, resting near the lantern, gently turned once more. Its tiny bow now pointed toward one of the floating bridges. Elias smiled. "I think it wants us to leave the boat." "I think so too." Aria's voice was little more than a whisper. The wooden boat touched the bridge so gently that there was almost no sound at all. No bump, no splash, only the faintest kiss of polished wood against polished wood. Elias stepped ashore first. The bridge felt wonderfully solid beneath his feet. It was built from pale cedar, whose surface carried thousands of tiny carved lines. At first, they looked almost random. Then he looked closer. Every line folded into another. Every curve met another curve. The entire bridge had been carved to resemble countless folded sheets of paper. It was as though an ordinary paper boat had quietly dreamed of becoming a bridge. He rested one hand lightly upon the smooth wooden railing. It felt warm, not from sunlight, from time, as though generations of gentle travelers had rested their hands in exactly the same place. Behind them, their little boat quietly drifted away. No rope had ever held it. No farewell was needed. It simply returned to the sea that had brought it. Elias watched until it became one tiny light among millions of others. Then he noticed something that made him stop completely. Someone stood at the far end of the bridge. A young woman. She appeared no older than Elias himself. Long midnight black hair flowed softly around her shoulders, moving gently, although no wind could be felt. Her graceful robe shimmered with delicate shades of ivory and pale blue, embroidered so finely that the patterns resembled tiny paper boats floating across quiet water. In her hands, she carefully held a single paper boat, not making it, not repairing it, simply holding it with the same tenderness one might cradle a fragile memory. She had already seen them, yet she did not wave. She did not call their names. She simply smiled, the kind of smile that belongs to someone who has been expecting guests and never once doubted they would arrive. The young woman waited until they reached her. She did not step forward. She did not bow. She simply remained where she was, holding the little paper boat with both hands. When Elias finally stood before her, she smiled a little more warmly. "I've been hoping this journey would find you." Her voice carried the same quiet gentleness as the sea itself. Every word seemed to arrive without disturbing the silence around it. Elias returned the smile. I'm Elias. So I know. There was no surprise in her answer, only kindness. She turned her eyes toward Aria. And it's good to see you again. Aria inclined her head with quiet affection. It's been many years. It has. The young woman's eyes lingered upon the endless sea for a moment. But the boats are patient. They've never minded waiting. Elias looked between them. You've met before. We have. Aria's smile carried the warmth of an old memory. The first time I came here, she was the one who welcomed me. The young woman lowered her gaze to the paper boat resting in her hands. I welcome everyone. She spoke so naturally that it almost sounded like breathing. Not proudly, simply truthfully. Elias found himself studying her more closely. She could not have been much older than he was. Yet there was something timeless about her peaceful presence. Not ancient, not distant, only deeply at home. Her long midnight hair shimmered softly beneath the lantern light. The delicate silver embroidery upon her pale blue robes resembled tiny folded boats drifting across gentle waves. Even the ribbons woven through her sleeves moved with the calm rhythm of the sea, though there was still no wind. Finally, she looked back at Elias. My name is Elara. It is a pleasure to meet you. The name settled softly into the quiet air, as though the bridge itself had already known it. Elias smiled. It's beautiful. She laughed very gently. So the sea once told me. For a moment, none of them spoke. The silence felt wonderfully comfortable. Then Elara slowly lifted the little paper boat she had been carrying. It looked almost identical to the one that had guided Elias from the hidden library. Only this one was different. Its paper shimmered with the faint silver glow of moonlight. Tiny constellations seemed to drift quietly across its delicate folds before fading again. She carefully placed it upon the wooden railing. The little boat remained perfectly still. It has already finished one journey. She rested one fingertip lightly against its folded sail, and before long, it will begin another. Elias watched the tiny vessel quietly glowing beneath the lanterns. So every paper boat eventually finds someone. Elara gently shook her head. No, her smile remained peaceful. Every paper boat eventually finds the journey that needs it most. Elara carefully lifted the little paper boat once again. She held it for a quiet moment, not as though she wished to keep it, but as though she wished to thank it. Then, with a gentle smile, she released it. The tiny vessel drifted softly into the air, not upward, not downward, simply forward. as though the moonlight itself had become a gentle current, carrying it toward the sea. It settled peacefully upon the water below. Without a sound, it joined the countless other paper boats, continuing their endless voyage beneath the stars. Elias watched until its tiny light became almost impossible to distinguish from the millions surrounding it. "You never keep them." Elara slowly shook her head. "No, they were never made to belong to one person." She rested both hands lightly upon the smooth wooden railing. "The moment we try to keep them, they stop becoming journeys." Those words lingered gently in the quiet air. Elias thought about every destination the hidden library had shown him, the lantern that had once floated down the river of floating lanterns, the dreams blooming peacefully inside forgotten gardens, the stars resting quietly above endless clouds. None of those places had asked him to possess anything. They had simply asked him to notice. Perhaps that had always been enough. A warm breeze drifted across the bridge. This time, it carried the faint fragrance of fresh paper, wild jasmine, and rain falling somewhere very far away. The countless lanterns suspended above the sea swayed together, ever so slightly. Tiny reflections shimmered across the calm water, like golden stars learning to dance. Elara smiled as she watched them. "They are listening." Elias looked upward. "The lanterns, the journeys." She laughed softly. "Everything here listens. The sea, the bridges, the flowers, even the silence." He found himself smiling. "And what are they listening for?" Elara turned toward the endless procession of paper boats. For the moment, someone chooses kindness without expecting it to return. Elias said nothing. The answer needed no explanation. Some truth the hidden library had taught him became smaller the moment too many words surrounded them. Far below, another tiny paper boat quietly drifted beneath the bridge. This one carried nothing more than a single folded paper crane. As it passed, one of the floating lanterns above slowly brightened, only for a heartbeat. Then, its warm glow gently returned to normal. Elias noticed. So every kindness changes something. Elara's eyes reflected both moonlight and lantern light as she answered. "Always." She looked toward him with the same peaceful certainty she had carried since they met. The beautiful part is, most travelers never realize how far their kindness continues to sail. For a little while, the three of them remained upon the bridge. No one seemed eager to continue. The sea of paper boats had a curious way of slowing, not only footsteps, but thoughts as well. Elias leaned gently against the smooth cedar railing. Far below, the quiet procession continued without end. Millions of tiny lights, each carrying its own peaceful story. He wondered how many had already completed their journeys, and how many had only just begun. Elara seemed to notice the question before he spoke it aloud. The sea never counts. She smiled gently. It only carries. Elias looked toward her. So no one here knows which journey began first. She slowly shook her head. No, and no one needs to. She looked out across the moonlit water. When we stop comparing journeys, we finally begin enjoying our own. The words settled inside him with surprising warmth. How often, he wondered, had people measured themselves against someone else's path, someone else's pace, someone else's destination. Yet every paper boat below seemed perfectly content with only one thing, its own quiet voyage. Just then, a small movement caught Elias's eye. A tiny paper boat drifting beneath the bridge had begun to circle slowly around another, not because either one had become lost. They simply moved together for a little while, turning gently beneath the moonlight, almost like two old friends sharing the same stretch of sea. Neither boat tried to lead, neither tried to follow. For several peaceful moments, they simply traveled side by side. Then, just as quietly, their paths separated. One continued eastward beneath the floating lanterns. The other drifted toward the open sea. Neither looked back. Neither seemed saddened. They had simply shared part of the journey. Elias smiled softly. They didn't stay together. Elara's eyes followed the two tiny lights until they slowly disappeared among countless others. No, they weren't meant to. She turned toward him. But did you notice something? He thought for a moment. They were never alone. Her smile grew warmer. Exactly. The sea of paper boats teaches something very gentle. Some souls walk beside us for only a little while. They're not meant to stay forever. They are meant to make one part of the journey more beautiful. The quiet truth settled deep within Elias. He thought of every place the hidden library had carried him, every traveler he had met, every gentle guide who had appeared, only to quietly continue their own path. For the first time, he no longer wondered why those meetings had been brief. Perhaps their beauty had always been found in exactly that. Not forever, but enough. Above them, one of the floating lanterns slowly brightened. Its warm golden light spread softly across the bridge. Then another answered, then another, until a peaceful ribbon of lanterns stretched ahead through the silver mist, forming a glowing pathway farther into the sea of paper boats. Elara looked toward the newly illuminated bridge. A knowing smile appeared upon her face. "I think," she whispered, "the sea is ready to show us its next quiet story." Elara stepped forward first, not because she wished to lead them, but because she already understood the quiet rhythm of the bridge. Elias and Aria followed a few peaceful steps behind. The ribbon of glowing lanterns stretched gently ahead, curving through silver mist like a pathway patiently drawn by moonlight itself. With every step, the sounds of the sea became softer, not quieter, simply closer. The gentle brushing of folded paper, the peaceful whisper of calm water, the distant music of countless tiny journeys continuing beneath the stars. It was impossible to tell where one sound ended and another quietly began. After some time, the bridge widened into a small circular platform suspended above the endless sea. There were no walls, no roof, only open sky, still water, and moonlight. At its center stood a simple wooden table. Upon it rested a single empty bowl carved from pale silver wood. Nothing more. No ornaments, no symbols, no instructions. Elias looked at it curiously. "What is it for?" Elara walked to the table and rested one hand gently upon its smooth surface. "For listening," he smiled softly. "I don't think bowls usually listen." "They don't," she laughed quietly, "but silence does." Aria smiled to herself. "I remember this place." Elias turned toward her. "You've stood here before." "Only once." "What happened?" She looked into the empty bowl for a long moment before answering. "It reminded me of something I had forgotten." Elias waited. She gently shook her head. "It reminds everyone of something different." There was no invitation to ask more, only a quiet acceptance that some memories wish to arrive in their own time. Elara slowly stepped back. The sea of paper boats never tells travelers what to remember. It simply gives their hearts enough stillness to remember by themselves. A peaceful silence settled over the little platform. Far below, the endless rivers of glowing paper boats continued flowing beneath the moon. One by one, tiny reflections shimmered across the smooth surface of the empty bowl. At first, they looked like ordinary stars. Then, Elias realized they were not reflections from the sky. Each tiny light belonged to a paper boat, passing quietly beneath the platform. The bowl was reflecting journeys, not heavens. He found himself smiling. It doesn't show the stars. Elara looked toward him with warm eyes. No, it shows hope. No one spoke after that. There was nothing left to explain. The bowl continued filling itself, not with water, but with countless tiny lights drifting peacefully across its polished surface. As Elias watched them, he felt an unexpected calm settle quietly inside him. The sea had shown him flowers that bloomed through kindness, blank pages that still carried hope, and journeys that never needed to compete. Now, it offered only silence, and somehow, that silence felt like the most beautiful gift of all. When they left the quiet platform, the bowl remained exactly as they had found it, still, silent, patiently gathering the gentle reflections of passing journeys. Nothing had been taken from it. Nothing needed to be. The lantern-lit bridge continued beyond the mist, curving softly toward a place where the sea seemed to breathe with a different rhythm. Not louder, only deeper. The little paper boat that had guided Elias since the hidden library appeared once again. It floated quietly beneath the bridge, never rushing ahead, never falling behind. Sometimes it disappeared beneath the mist for several heartbeats, only to emerge again, exactly where it needed to be. Elias smiled. It always knows where we are. Elara looked down at the tiny vessel. I don't think it's following us. She paused gently. I think we're following it. For a while, they walked without speaking. The silence no longer felt unfamiliar. It had become a companion of its own. Every now and then, a paper boat drifted beneath the bridge, carrying another small treasure. A tiny seashell, a smooth piece of blue glass, a single pressed maple leaf glowing softly beneath the moon. None seemed more important than another. Each carried only one simple gift, and that was enough. Ahead, the bridge slowly widened once more, this time not into another platform, into a peaceful garden floating upon the sea. There was no soil, no stone paths, only countless wooden terraces resting just above the calm water, connected by graceful little bridges. Upon every terrace grew delicate white reeds. Their slender stems swayed gently, although the night remained perfectly still. The reeds made almost no sound, only the faintest whisper, like pages turning somewhere very far away. Between them stood hundreds of tiny glass lanterns, no larger than the palm of a hand. None held flames. Instead, each lantern glowed from within, as though a small piece of moonlight had quietly chosen to rest inside. Elias slowed his steps. I've never seen anything like this. Neither had he imagined that a garden could feel so peaceful without flowers, without bright colors, without fragrance. Its beauty lived entirely in stillness. Elara stepped onto the first wooden terrace. She moved carefully, almost respectfully. The garden of quiet reeds. She spoke the name so softly that it became part of the night rather than interrupting it. Elias looked across the endless rows of silver-white reeds dancing gently beneath the moon. They don't seem to move with the wind. They don't. Elara smiled. They move whenever someone remembers an act of kindness. Almost as she finished speaking, one small cluster of reeds nearby leaned gently together, not because of wind, not because of tide, simply as though acknowledging a memory too beautiful to remain unseen. Elias watched in quiet wonder. The sea of paper boats, he realized, did not preserve objects. It preserved kindness. The garden of quiet reeds welcomed them, one gentle step at a time. There were no gates, no winding paths asking visitors where to walk, only graceful wooden terraces stretching peacefully across the moonlit sea, allowing every traveler to choose their own quiet pace. Elias slowed almost without realizing it. Each step upon the warm cedar seemed softer than the last. The countless white reeds surrounding them continued their delicate dance, not with the wind, not with the tide, but with something far more gentle, memory. As they passed another small terrace, one single reed slowly leaned toward Elias. It moved so delicately that he almost believed it had been an illusion. He stopped. "Did you see that?" Arya smiled. "I did." "It greeted you." Elias looked back toward the slender white stem. "It knows me." Elara softly shook her head. "No, it recognized something." Her answer carried no mystery, only quiet understanding. The garden never remembers names. It remembers kindness. Elias looked thoughtfully across the endless sea of silver-white reeds. Thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, each moving in its own peaceful rhythm. If someone forgets their kindness, he asked quietly, does the garden forget too? Elara's smile became wonderfully gentle. No, kindness is remembered long after the one who offered it has moved on. The words settled warmly inside him. He thought of the countless travelers whose paper boats still drifted across the sea. Perhaps many of them had already reached places beyond imagination, yet their kindness still quietly touched this peaceful garden. Nothing beautiful had truly been left behind. It had simply continued growing somewhere else. Just then, one of the tiny moonlit lanterns resting among the reeds slowly brightened. Not suddenly, only enough to become noticeable. Another answered nearby, then another. One by one, small circles of warm light quietly awakened throughout the garden. No pattern seemed to guide them, Yet together, they created something breathtaking. The lights resembled constellations, gently blooming among the reeds instead of the sky. Elias found himself smiling. "They're beautiful." Elara looked upward. "They're listening again." The same answer. But this time, Elias understood it differently. The lanterns were not waiting for voices. They were listening for hearts, quietly choosing goodness, even when no one else would ever know. Far ahead, a single reed bowed gracefully toward one tiny lantern. The lantern answered with a soft golden pulse. Then, another reed responded farther away. Soon, gentle waves of movement spread peacefully across the entire floating garden. Not loud, not dramatic, only countless small acts, quietly answering one another, almost like kindness itself, passing from one heart to another without anyone needing to ask where it began. The quiet wave of movement slowly faded. One by one, the graceful reeds returned to perfect stillness. The tiny lanterns continued glowing softly among them, as though nothing unusual had happened at all. Yet Elias carried the moment with him. It was astonishing how something so gentle could leave such a lasting feeling. Elara continued walking at her unhurried pace. Every few moments, she would lightly brush the tips of the reeds with her fingertips, never bending them, never disturbing them, only greeting them, almost as one might greet old friends while passing through a peaceful village. Elias noticed, "You know every one of them." She smiled. "No, I simply try to notice each one." The answer made him smile. There was a difference, a beautiful one. Far ahead, they reached another small terrace overlooking the endless sea. Unlike the others, this one held no lanterns, only a single wooden bench. It faced the moonlit horizon, where countless paper boats continued their quiet voyage. Elara paused beside it. "Every traveler sits here. Only once." Elias looked at the empty bench. "What happens?" She smiled gently. "Nothing." He laughed quietly. "That can't be all." "It is." She rested one hand upon the smooth cedar backrest. "This is where people discover that nothing is sometimes exactly what the heart has been searching for." Her words settled softly into the silence. Elias slowly sat upon the bench. The wood was pleasantly warm beneath him. Before him, the endless sea of paper boats stretched beyond every horizon. Behind him, the garden of quiet reeds whispered almost silently beneath the moon. No task waited, no lesson needed solving, no mystery demanded an answer. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was absolutely nothing he needed to do, only be. his breathing slowed. Even more, the gentle rhythm of the sea quietly matched every peaceful breath. Somewhere nearby, a tiny paper boat drifted beneath the terrace, carrying a single white feather. Another followed, holding only a tiny seashell. Neither seemed extraordinary, yet together they somehow made the night feel complete. After several quiet minutes, Elias finally spoke. "I think I've spent much of my life believing peace was something waiting at the end of the journey." Neither Area nor Elara interrupted him. They simply listened. He smiled as another paper boat drifted quietly beneath the terrace. "But perhaps peace has been quietly walking beside me all along." For a moment, no one answered. Then Elara looked toward the moonlit sea. "It always has. It simply speaks so softly that we often don't hear it until the world around us becomes quiet enough to listen." A warm silence followed, not because there was nothing left to say, but because every word had already found exactly where it belonged. When Elias finally rose from the quiet bench, nothing around him had changed. The sea still shimmered beneath the moon. The reeds still whispered softly among themselves. The paper boats continued their endless, patient voyage. Yet, the world somehow felt lighter, not because it had become different, because he had. They continued deeper into the floating garden. The wooden terraces curved gently across the calm water, revealing new quiet corners with every few steps. Some terraces held only reeds. Others held small clusters of moonlit lanterns. One was home to nothing more than a smooth white stone resting peacefully upon the cedar floor. No explanation accompanied it. No sign offered meaning. It simply belonged. Elias smiled. "The hidden library has taught me something." Elara looked toward him with quiet curiosity. "And what is that?" He glanced toward the little stone. "Not everything beautiful needs a reason." Her gentle laughter blended so naturally with the silence that it seemed to become part of the garden itself. "I think," she said softly, "you're beginning to understand why this place exists." As they walked on, the terraces slowly narrowed once again. The reeds became taller. Their silver white stems now rose well above Elias's shoulders, swaying gracefully beneath the moonlight. Together, they formed peaceful walls that gently embraced the narrow pathway. It felt almost like walking through living pages of a story. Every whisper carried by the reeds sounded slightly different. Some resembled turning pages. Others reminded Elias of distant rain falling upon quiet rooftops. A few sounded almost like laughter, remembered long after the voices themselves had faded. He paused, Do you hear that? Elias smiled. I hear something different every time. Elara nodded. So do I. The garden never repeats itself. Elias listened again. This time, the whisper reminded him of Rowan carefully lighting lanterns beside the river, only for a heartbeat. Then the sound changed once more. Now, it reminded him of the gentle rain inside the conservatory. Another heartbeat, and it became the quiet wind moving through the orchard of golden moons. He stopped walking completely. The garden remembers. He whispered. Elara gently shook her head. No, it helps you remember. The words settled inside him with unexpected warmth. He looked around once more. Nothing here was creating memories. It was quietly returning the ones already resting inside his heart. Every place he had visited, every kindness he had received, every peaceful lesson he had carried onward. The hidden library had never truly left him. It had simply become part of the traveler he was still becoming. Ahead, the reeds slowly began to part on their own. Not quickly, not dramatically, just enough to reveal another moonlit terrace waiting peacefully beyond. At its center, something tall and graceful stood beneath a circle of softly glowing lanterns. For now, the silver mist revealed only its silhouette. Whatever waited there, it had been patiently waiting for a very long time. The reeds slowly stepped aside, not because anyone had asked them to, but as though they already knew the path was ready to be seen. Moonlight poured gently through the opening. Its silver glow rested upon a single tree, standing quietly at the center of the terrace. It was unlike any tree Elias had ever known. Its trunk was smooth as polished ivory wood. Its branches stretched gracefully toward the stars, delicate and elegant, as though they had grown without ever feeling the need to reach too quickly. Yet, there were no leaves. Instead, hundreds of tiny, folded paper boats rested upon its branches, each one hung by the thinnest silver thread. Whenever the reeds whispered, the little boats swayed ever so gently. Together, they sounded like the soft turning of distant pages. Elias stood completely still. The sight filled him with the same quiet wonder he had felt upon first entering the hidden library. What is this place? Elara's eyes reflected the countless little boats shimmering beneath the moon. This, she whispered, is the tree of quiet journeys. She stepped forward slowly. The sea carries every journey. The garden remembers every kindness. And this tree, she rested her fingertips lightly against its smooth trunk, keeps every peaceful beginning. Elias looked more carefully. No two paper boats were alike. Some were folded from bright white paper. Others had gently aged into warm shades of ivory and cream. Some were wonderfully simple. Others had been folded with astonishing care, every tiny crease perfectly placed. Each one seemed to hold its own quiet story. Who made them? Elara smiled. Travelers. Everyone. She nodded. Not before they arrived, but before they left. The answer surprised him. They leave one behind. They leave one, she replied softly. When they discover the beginning they wish to carry home. For a long moment, Elias simply listened to the quiet music of the tiny paper boats moving among the branches. None seemed lonely. None seemed forgotten. Together, they had become something far more beautiful than they could ever have been alone. Almost without thinking, he reached into the pocket of his cloak. His fingers found a small square of folded paper tucked safely inside. He smiled. It was nothing important, only a blank page he had absent-mindedly folded many days ago while resting inside the library. He looked toward Elara. She smiled before he even spoke. I think, she whispered, the tree already knows. The blossom lantern glowed warmly. One more golden blossom quietly unfolded. Its gentle light rested upon the blank piece of paper in Elias's hand. For the first time, he found himself wondering not what journey awaited him next, but what quiet beginning he hoped one day to leave behind for someone else. Elias remained beneath the tree of quiet journeys for a long while. He never unfolded the small blank page resting in his hand. He never tried to write upon it. Somehow, it already felt complete, not because it contained words, but because it still contained possibility. The countless paper boats hanging from the silver branches continued their gentle dance above him. Every quiet movement filled the moonlit terrace with the soft sound of paper greeting paper. It reminded him of the hidden library itself, shelves welcoming stories, stories welcoming travelers, travelers quietly becoming part of stories they had never expected to find. Elara slowly stepped away from the tree. The sea will keep thee safe. Elias looked upward once more. For how long? She smiled. As long as someone still needs them. There was no number, no measure of years, only trust. The answer felt strangely perfect. Nothing truly kind, he realized, ever seemed concerned with time. Aria quietly joined him beneath the silver branches. She looked at the little blank page, still resting in his hands. You're thinking, he smiled. I usually am. She laughed softly. I know, but this time, your thoughts seem lighter. He looked down at the paper. When I first came to the hidden library, I believed every journey would help me discover something extraordinary. He paused. The sea whispered gently beyond the reeds. Now, I think every journey has simply helped me notice ordinary things more carefully. Elias' smile grew wonderfully warm. I think that's exactly what extraordinary means. For a few peaceful moments, none of them spoke. The moon drifted quietly overhead, far beyond the floating garden. Millions of paper boats continued their endless voyage. Somewhere among them, the tiny boat that had first arrived inside the hidden library still floated peacefully onward, no longer leading Elias, simply continuing its own beautiful journey. Elara gently lifted one hand toward the branches above. Immediately, one tiny paper boat loosened from its silver thread. It floated silently downward, turning gracefully through the moonlight before landing softly in the palm of her hand. She held it carefully, then offered it to Elias. He looked at her in surprise. I thought every traveler left one here. They do. She smiled, but every traveler also carries one away. He accepted the tiny paper boat with both hands. It felt impossibly light, almost weightless, yet somehow it carried the quiet comfort of the entire sea. What does this one carry? He asked. Elara's eyes reflected both moonlight and lantern light as she answered. It carries whatever kindness you choose not to forget. The blossom lantern glowed warmly beside him. Its newest golden blossom slowly opened completely until all of its petals rested peacefully beneath the moon. For the first time since leaving the hidden library, its gentle light no longer seemed to guide the way ahead. It simply walked beside him, like an old friend who no longer needed to lead, because the traveler had quietly learned how to recognize the path for himself. The tiny paper boat rested quietly within Elias's hands. It weighed almost nothing, yet he found himself holding it with the same care one might offer a fragile promise. Its folded edges shimmered faintly beneath the moonlight. Unlike every other paper boat he had seen upon the sea, this one carried no lantern, no flower, no tiny treasure, only stillness. Elara noticed the thoughtful look upon his face. It isn't empty. She smiled softly. It is simply waiting. Elias gently turned the little boat in his hands. Waiting for what? For the kindness that will travel with you. The answer arrived so naturally that it felt less like instruction and more like something the sea itself had quietly whispered through her. Together, they left the tree of quiet journeys behind. The silver branches continued swaying peacefully beneath the moon. countless paper boats singing their delicate song long after the tree had disappeared behind the reeds. The floating terraces slowly became narrower once more. This part of the garden felt quieter than anywhere they had visited before. Even the reeds whispered more softly. The tiny lanterns glowed with a warmer light, almost as though they recognized the little paper boat Elias now carried. After several peaceful minutes, they reached a place unlike any other within the garden. The terraces simply ended. Beyond them stretched open sea once more. No bridges, no pathways, only a perfectly circular wooden deck suspended above the moonlit water. At its very center stood a compass, not made of brass, not carved from stone. Its face was crafted from smooth white wood, while the needle itself appeared to have been woven from silver moonlight. It moved gently, never settling toward north. Instead, it drifted slowly, almost as though listening to something far beyond the horizon. Elias stepped closer. "I don't think it's broken." Elara smiled. "It has never searched for directions." He looked at her curiously. "Then what does it follow?" She rested her hand lightly upon the edge of the compass. "It follows gentle hearts." For a long moment, Elias simply watched the silver needle. It turned peacefully, paused, then slowly rotated again. Never restless, never uncertain, only patient, as though waiting for someone rather than somewhere. Then, without warning, the needle stopped, not toward the sea, not toward the moon. It pointed quietly toward Elias. He blinked. "I didn't do anything." Elara's smile became wonderfully warm. "I know. Sometimes," she whispered, "the heart chooses a direction long before the mind notices it." The blossom lantern answered with a soft golden glow. Its light reflected across the white compass face until the silver needle shimmered like a tiny river of moonlight. Elias looked down at the paper boat resting in one hand, then at the compass before him. Neither seemed to be asking him to make a decision. They were simply reminding him that the journey he carried within himself had already begun. The silver needle remained perfectly still, not because it had become fixed, but because, for this quiet moment, it had already found what it was listening for. Elias looked around the circular terrace. Nothing extraordinary seemed to have happened. The sea continued breathing beneath the moon. The reeds whispered softly behind them. Far away, the endless rivers of paper boats drifted toward horizons no eye could fully follow. Yet the peaceful compass still pointed toward him. He smiled almost shyly. "I've never had a compass choose me." Elara's laughter was little more than a warm breath upon the night. Neither has anyone else. He looked up in surprise. It never points to travelers. It points to what they quietly become. Those words lingered between them, not asking to be understood immediately, only inviting the heart to carry them a little farther. Elias lowered his eyes toward the tiny paper boat resting in his hands. He remembered the frightened traveler who had first stepped through the doors of the hidden library, the one who had believed every answer waited somewhere ahead. Every destination, every lesson, every beautiful place had slowly softened that belief. Perhaps the greatest discoveries had never been waiting at the end of the road. Perhaps they had been quietly growing inside him with every gentle step. A tiny splash echoed below, soft enough to sound almost imagined. 3 paper boats had gathered beside the terrace. Unlike the countless others, they did not continue drifting. They simply floated together beneath the moonlight. One carried a white feather. Another held a tiny pressed blue flower. The third carried nothing at all. The 3 remained together for several peaceful breaths. Then, almost playfully, they separated once more. Each continued toward its own quiet horizon. Elias watched until their little lights disappeared among millions of others. They weren't choosing different journeys. He spoke almost to himself. They were completing the same one. Elara smiled. The sea loves moments like that. Meeting without needing to remain. A comfortable silence followed. Elias rested both hands upon the smooth wooden railing, watching the moon's reflection stretch endlessly across the calm water. When I first visited this sea, she said softly, I thought every goodbye was something to fear. Elias looked toward her, and now she smiled peacefully. Now I think a beautiful farewell is simply another way of saying thank you. The words settled gently inside him. He thought of Rowan, of Nara, of every gentle soul the hidden library had placed along his path. None of them had truly been left behind. They simply continued their own beautiful journeys, while quietly becoming part of his. The silver needle moved again, only a little, not toward another place, but toward the open sea beyond the terrace. Elara noticed immediately. I think, she whispered, someone is waiting. Not for her, not for Area. Her eyes rested warmly upon Elias. For you, far beyond the moonlit water, a single golden light slowly appeared within the silver mist. Unlike the tiny paper boats, this light stood much taller, steadier, almost like a welcoming lantern, glowing patiently somewhere upon the endless sea. It did not move. It simply waited, exactly as though it had known that sooner or later, Elias would find his way there. No one hurried toward the distant light. The sea of paper boats had already taught Elias that beautiful things were never found by rushing. Instead, they remained upon the quiet terrace for a few more peaceful moments. The silver compass rested silently between them. Its moonlit needle no longer searched. It simply pointed gently across the water, as though whispering, "Whenever you're ready." Elias found himself smiling, not because he finally knew where he was going, but because he no longer felt the need to know everything before taking the next step. That realization alone felt like a quiet gift. He carefully slipped the tiny paper boat into the inside pocket of his cloak, not to hide it, to carry it close. Almost immediately, the blossom lantern responded. Its golden light grew just a little warmer, not brighter, warmer, as though recognizing that another gentle promise had found its place beside his heart. Elara noticed. "It likes that." Elias looked toward the lantern. "I don't think I've ever understood it completely." "You don't need to." She smiled. "Some companions aren't given to us so we can understand them. They're given to us so we never have to walk alone." Those words settled deeply within him. He rested one hand lightly upon the lantern's silver handle. How many times had it quietly guided him? How many silent moments had it shared without ever asking for attention? He had always believed he was carrying it. Perhaps it had been carrying him too. A gentle breeze drifted across the sea, the first real breeze since entering the garden. It wasn't cold nor warm. It simply carried movement. Thousands of tiny paper boats answered together, not dramatically, only with the smallest change of direction, like countless birds adjusting their wings without breaking formation. The rivers of light slowly curved across the moonlit water, all of them almost imperceptibly toward the same distant glow. Elias watched in quiet amazement. "They're following it." Elara softly shook her head. "No, they are welcoming it." He looked at her curiously. The sea has many places, but only a few where journeys naturally gather. Her eyes remained upon the golden light, not because they must, because their hearts arrive there at the same time. The thought felt strangely beautiful. Not every traveler reached the same destination, yet sometimes their journeys gently crossed long enough to remind one another that none of them had ever been sailing alone. Far across the calm water, the golden light slowly became clearer. It was no lantern, no lighthouse, no building. It shimmered like an entire shoreline, woven from warm light and moonlit mist. Its reflection stretched across the sea in a broad ribbon of gold. The paper boats nearest to it glowed more brightly than all the others, not because they had changed, but because something ahead was quietly welcoming every peaceful journey home. Without speaking, Elara took the first gentle step toward the narrow bridge leading away from the terrace. Arya followed. Elias remained where he was for one final heartbeat. He looked once more at the silver compass. It had already become still again, its quiet purpose fulfilled. He smiled gratefully. Then, with the blossom lantern glowing warmly beside him, and the tiny paper boat resting safely over his heart, he stepped forward. Together, the three travelers followed the moonlit bridge toward the waiting light. The bridge carried them gently toward the waiting light. It curved so gracefully above the sea of paper boats that Elias could no longer see where it truly began, or where it might finally end. Behind them, the garden of quiet reeds slowly disappeared into silver mist. The tree of quiet journeys became only a pale silhouette beneath the moon. Soon, even that quietly faded from sight. Yet Elias did not feel as though he were leaving it behind. Some places, he had learned, did not remain within the world. They remained within the traveler. The little paper boat resting inside his cloak seemed wonderfully light against his heart. He placed one hand over it for a moment, not to check whether it was still there, simply to say thank you. The blossom lantern answered with another gentle pulse of warm golden light. Elara noticed. It knows. Elias smiled. What does it know? That you've stopped searching for proof. She looked ahead toward the glowing horizon and have started trusting what peace already feels like. He considered her words quietly. There had been a time when every new destination filled him with questions. What does this place mean? What am I supposed to learn? What happens next? Now, those questions had softened, not because they no longer mattered, but because he had discovered something gentler. Sometimes, walking peacefully beside wonder was already enough. The bridge slowly descended. The sea below shimmered like polished sapphire beneath the moon. Millions of paper boats continued drifting with perfect patience. Not one seemed anxious to arrive. Not one feared the distance still ahead. Their quiet confidence felt contagious. Far before them, the great golden shoreline slowly revealed more of itself. It was not land, not exactly. It seemed woven from countless floating terraces, bathed in warm lantern light. Graceful wooden walkways curved gently through the glow. Tall lantern posts reflected upon calm water like golden trees. From this distance, the entire place resembled a peaceful harbor welcoming every gentle journey home. Elias stopped for only a heartbeat. It feels. He searched for the right words. Familiar. Elara smiled. It should. He looked toward her. You've never been here. I know, but hope often feels familiar, even before we've discovered why. Those words settled softly inside him. Perhaps that was why the hidden library never frightened him. Every destination, no matter how extraordinary, had somehow felt like remembering rather than discovering. The bridge ended quietly beneath their feet. Ahead, the first warm lantern swayed gently above a polished wooden pier. Its golden reflection stretched peacefully across the sea until it touched the countless paper boats still drifting beneath the moon. Elara paused beside the lantern. She looked toward Elias with the same calm smile she had worn since the moment they met upon the bridge. This is where my journey beside yours grows quieter. She did not say goodbye, not yet, only enough for Elias to understand that every beautiful meeting eventually reached the moment where it gently prepared to become a beautiful farewell. And somehow, for the first time, that thought no longer made his heart heavy. It simply made him grateful. The lantern above the pier swayed almost imperceptibly. Its warm golden light rested gently upon the calm water, where thousands of paper boats drifted silently past without disturbing a single reflection. Elias stood beside Elara. Neither of them spoke. Some silences, he had learned, were already saying everything that mattered. Ahead, the peaceful harbor slowly revealed itself. Graceful wooden walkways stretched across the moonlit water, connecting small floating pavilions whose roofs curved gently like folded wings. Every lantern glowed with the same comforting warmth. No two were identical. Some were round, some long and slender, some shaped almost like tiny paper boats themselves. Yet together, they illuminated the harbor with a quiet welcome that needed no words. Farther away, travelers wandered peacefully along the wooden paths. No crowds, no hurried footsteps. Some walked alone, others shared gentle conversations. A few simply stood at the railings, watching paper boats drift endlessly beneath the moon. No one appeared to be arriving. No one appeared to be leaving. It felt like a place that existed entirely between those two moments. Elias smiled softly. They all seem. He searched for the gentlest word. Content. Elara followed his gaze. They've stopped asking the journey to become something else. Her answer carried the same peaceful certainty as the sea itself. They are simply allowing it to be what it already is. They continued walking, the polished cedar beneath their feet reflected the lantern light with a warm golden glow. Every few steps, small bowls filled with floating white blossoms rested quietly along the railing. No one tended them, yet every flower remained perfectly fresh. Their delicate fragrance drifted gently across the harbor. Fresh jasmine, moonflowers, and the faint sweetness of blooming tea. The scent reminded Elias of another place, the tea house between seasons. He smiled almost to himself. Elara looked toward him. "You remembered. I didn't expect to. You weren't meant to expect it." She lightly touched one of the floating blossoms. The hidden library never separates its stories. It quietly lets them find one another. Elias watched the flower continue, drifting inside its bowl. Then he looked beyond the harbor. The endless sea of paper boats still stretched toward every horizon. Nothing had ended. The harbor was not the destination, only another beautiful place where the journey could quietly breathe. As they reached the center of the harbor, they came upon a long wooden pier, extending farther into the moonlit sea than all the others. At its very end stood a single empty chair, simple, beautifully crafted, facing only the endless horizon. No table, no decorations, just one chair waiting beneath the stars. Elias looked at it curiously. No one is sitting there. Elara smiled. They never do. He blinked then. Why is it here? She looked toward the quiet chair with unmistakable affection. It reminds every traveler that hope should always have a place waiting for it. The words lingered softly between them. Elias looked once more at the empty chair. For the first time, it did not seem empty at all. It seemed wonderfully patient. The empty chair remained behind them. Its quiet silhouette slowly disappeared into the warm glow of the harbor, until it became only another peaceful memory resting beside the sea. Ahead, the floating walkways widened once more. This part of the harbor felt wonderfully alive. Not busy, never hurried, simply, gently lived in. Small wooden pavilions rested upon calm water like quiet islands. Some travelers sat together, sharing warm cups of fragrant tea. Others quietly repaired tiny paper boats beneath hanging lanterns. One elderly couple stood side by side at the railing, watching the endless sea without speaking. Neither seemed to need words. Their peaceful silence already sounded like a lifetime of conversation. Elias smiled softly. They all seemed to know each other. Elara followed his gaze. Some do, and some met only this evening. He looked surprised. They seem like old friends. She nodded gently. Kindness shortens many distances. The answer lingered pleasantly within him. Perhaps friendship had never truly depended upon time. Perhaps it depended upon the quiet willingness to make another traveler feel at home. As they continued, a soft melody drifted across the moonlit harbor. No instruments could be seen. No musicians waited beneath the lanterns. Yet somewhere, music quietly existed. It flowed gently through the wooden walkways, like another current upon the sea. Sometimes it sounded almost like distant strings. Then it became little more than the whisper of wind moving through paper sails. Finally, it dissolved once again into peaceful silence. Elias listened carefully. Where is it coming from? Elara smiled. The harbor sings. She laughed softly. No, the travelers do. He looked around in quiet confusion. No one is singing. They don't need to. She rested her fingertips upon the smooth wooden railing. Every grateful heart leaves behind a little music. The harbor simply remembers how to play it. Elias closed his eyes for a moment. Without trying to understand, he simply listened. The melody changed again. Now, it reminded him of gentle rain falling upon the conservatory. A few peaceful notes later, he heard the distant bells of the valley of silent bells, soft enough to feel more remembered than heard. Then, very quietly, came the warm laughter of Rowan, lighting lanterns beside the river. He opened his eyes slowly. They're all here. Elara nodded. Not the people, the gratitude they left behind. The words filled the harbor with even greater warmth. Elias realized that every destination he had visited still lived somewhere within the hidden library, not because the places remained unchanged, but because every act of kindness continued echoing long after the footsteps had faded. At the end of the next floating walkway, they reached a beautifully crafted pavilion, open on every side to the moonlit sea. Suspended beneath its cedar roof hung hundreds of tiny silver chimes. Yet, not one of them moved. Not one made a sound. They waited in perfect stillness, almost as though listening for a single beautiful moment before choosing to sing. The tiny silver chimes remained perfectly still. Not a single one stirred, not even when the gentle breeze from the sea wandered quietly through the open pavilion. Elias stepped beneath them. He looked upward. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of delicate silver bells hung upon nearly invisible threads. Each had been crafted differently. Some resembled tiny lanterns. Others looked like folded flowers. A few had been shaped like little paper boats, no larger than a sparrow's feather. Their polished surfaces reflected the moonlight in soft silver circles across the cedar floor. "They don't move," Elias whispered. Elara nodded. "They are waiting for the wind." She smiled. "No, for gratitude." He looked back at the silent chimes. "I don't understand." "You will." She stepped quietly to one side, leaving the center of the pavilion empty, not as though she wished to teach him, as though she trusted the harbor to do it instead. A peaceful silence settled around them. Far beyond the pavilion, the sea of paper boats continued its endless voyage. Warm lanterns shimmered across calm sapphire water. Somewhere in the distance, the gentle melody of the harbor still floated upon the night. Then, a young traveler quietly entered the pavilion from another walkway. He carried no luggage, only a small folded blanket beneath one arm. He could not have been older than 20. Without noticing Elias or the others, he walked slowly to the middle of the pavilion. He looked upward toward the countless silver chimes, closed his eyes, placed one hand gently over his heart, and smiled. Nothing more, no words, no prayer, no ceremony, only one peaceful smile filled with quiet thankfulness. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, one tiny silver chime nearest to him moved. Only once. Its gentle note floated into the night. Clear, warm, pure. A second answered nearby. Then another, soon. Dozens of little chimes awakened across the pavilion. None played a melody alone. Yet together, their voices became something almost impossible to describe. It sounded less like music and more like moonlight learning how to sing. The young traveler lowered his hand. His peaceful smile remained exactly the same. Without looking back, he quietly continued along the wooden walkway until he disappeared among the lanterns. One by one, the silver chimes slowly became still again. The music gently faded into silence. Elias remained standing beneath them. He had never witnessed anything so beautifully simple. He didn't ring them. Elara's voice was barely louder than the sea itself. No, he remembered to be thankful. Elias looked upward once more. So gratitude has its own music. She smiled. It always has. We're simply too busy most days to hear it. The blossom lantern glowed warmly beside him. For the briefest moment, its soft golden light blended with the silver reflections dancing across the silent chimes. Warmth, meeting wonder, kindness, meeting gratitude. Elias quietly realized perhaps they had never been different things at all. Perhaps they had always been the very same song. For a long while, no one spoke. The last silver note had already dissolved into the night. Yet, its quiet beauty remained. Elias found himself looking upward once more. Hundreds of tiny chimes rested peacefully above him, silent again, patient almost, as though they had never sung at all. He smiled. They don't hold onto the music. Elara gently shook her head. No, they give it away. The answer settled softly within him. How different, he thought, the world might feel if kindness were offered the same way. Not collected, not protected, simply shared. Together, they left the pavilion of silent chimes. The warm lanterns welcomed them back onto the floating walkways. The harbor seemed even quieter now, not because fewer travelers remained, but because Elias himself had become quieter inside. As they walked, they passed a little wooden workshop resting above the calm sea. Its wide doors stood open. Inside, several travelers sat peacefully around a long cedar table. No one spoke. Each person carefully folded a single sheet of paper into a tiny boat. Nothing more. There were no decorations, no complicated designs, only simple paper boats, one after another. Young hands, old hands, large hands, small hands. Every fold carried the same patient care. Elias slowed. They are making them. Elara nodded. They always are. He watched quietly. An elderly woman finished folding her little boat. Instead of placing it beside herself, she gently slid it across the table toward a small child sitting opposite her. The child looked up in surprise. The woman simply smiled. The little girl accepted the paper boat with both hands, as though receiving something precious. Then, without hesitation, she quietly placed it into the hands of the traveler beside her. The little boat continued around the table, traveler to traveler, hand to hand. No one kept it. No one signed it. No one claimed it. Every person simply added one gentle fold before passing it onward. Elias watched in silence. Finally, he whispered, "Who finishes it?" Elara smiled. No one. He looked at her, but eventually, someone folds the last corner. She nodded, yes, but no one ever knows whose fold completed it. For several peaceful breaths, he simply watched the little paper boat continue its quiet circle around the table. Every traveler became part of its journey. No one received all the credit. No one needed to. A quiet warmth settled inside his heart. Perhaps that was why the sea of paper boats felt so peaceful. It had never been built by one extraordinary act. It had been created, one gentle fold at a time, one unnoticed kindness joining another. The blossom lantern glowed softly beside him, its warm light reflected upon the workshop windows. For a heartbeat, the golden reflection looked almost like another paper boat drifting quietly across the glass. Then it slowly faded ahead. The harbor opened toward one final moonlit walkway, extending peacefully over the sea. Far beyond it, the golden horizon had begun to soften, not because night was ending, but because somewhere beyond the silver mist, another quiet beginning was already waiting. The final walkway stretched quietly ahead, narrow, graceful. Its polished cedar boards glowed beneath rows of warm lanterns, whose reflections drifted across the calm sea like gentle ribbons of gold. No travelers walked before them now. The harbor slowly settled into peaceful silence behind their footsteps. Only the quiet sound of water remained. Elias found himself slowing, not because he was tired, because something inside him gently understood that this beautiful place was preparing to say goodbye. The realization no longer carried sadness, only gratitude. They walked together without speaking. Sometimes companionship needed nothing more than shared footsteps. The little paper boat, resting inside Elias's cloak, felt wonderfully familiar now. He no longer thought about it as a gift. It had quietly become part of his journey. The blossom lantern beside him glowed with calm, steady warmth. Its light no longer brightened in surprise. It no longer answered every new discovery. It simply walked beside him, constant, peaceful, faithful, exactly as hope often does. Ahead, the walkway ended at a small circular pier extending into the moonlit sea. No buildings waited there, no lantern posts, only one simple wooden arch rising gracefully above the water. It had been woven entirely from pale driftwood, polished smooth by time. Tiny white blossoms climbed around its curves. Their petals never fell. They simply rested quietly beneath the moon. Beyond the arch, nothing could be seen, only silver mist. Elias looked toward Elara. Is this another doorway? She smiled. In a way. He stepped closer. I can't see anything beyond it. You aren't meant to. She gently rested one hand upon the smooth driftwood. Some paths become visible only after we choose to continue. He nodded slowly. That no longer frightened him. Not after everything the hidden library had shown him. They stood together beneath the arch for several peaceful breaths. The sea remained wonderfully still. Then, without warning, one tiny paper boat drifted gently toward the pier. It carried no flower, no feather, no lantern, only a single folded page. The little boat stopped beside the wooden steps. Almost as though it had arrived exactly where it intended. Elara knelt gracefully beside the water. She lifted the folded page carefully from the tiny boat. Then, without opening it, she placed it gently back into Elias's hands. He looked at her curiously. "You didn't read it." She softly shook her head. "It isn't mine." He turned the little folded page over. No writing covered either side. It remained completely blank. Again, he smiled quietly. The sea likes blank pages. Elara's eyes shimmered with gentle amusement. No, it likes unwritten tomorrows. Those words settled into the quiet night like the final note of a beautiful song. Elias looked through the driftwood arch once more. The silver mist beyond it no longer felt empty. It felt welcoming, patient, full of possibilities that had no need to reveal themselves too early. He carefully placed the blank, folded page beside the little paper boat, already resting safely inside his cloak. Two simple gifts, neither carrying words, yet both somehow saying everything. The blossom lantern glowed softly, its warm light blended with the moonlight falling through the arch until, for a single peaceful heartbeat, the silver mist ahead seemed to shimmer like countless unwritten stories, quietly waiting for the traveler who would one day discover them. And together, without hurry, without fear, Elias, Elara, and Aria stepped beneath the driftwood arch, allowing the quiet light of the harbor to fade gently behind them. For a few quiet moments, there was only silver mist. No footsteps echoed beneath them. No sound of the harbor remained behind. Even the gentle whisper of the sea of paper boats seemed to rest. It felt less like walking and more like floating between one peaceful breath and the next. Elias never hurried. The blank folded page and the tiny paper boat rested safely inside his cloak. Neither seemed heavy, yet together they reminded him that some of life's greatest gifts carried almost no weight at all. Gradually, the silver mist began to brighten, not with the golden warmth of lanterns, nor with the cool radiance of moonlight. This light felt softer still, almost like the quiet glow that lingers in the sky just before dawn remembers it exists. Shapes slowly emerged ahead. Gentle wooden shelves, tall archways, curving staircases. One by one, they revealed themselves without ever startling the eye. Elias smiled. "We're home." Elara looked toward him. "Does it already feel like home?" He nodded without hesitation. "I don't know why. I never seem surprised when I return." Her smile held both joy and the smallest trace of farewell. "That's because the hidden library has stopped being a place you visit. She looked lovingly toward the endless shelves, slowly appearing through the mist. It has become part of the way you see the world. Those words reached deeper than any lesson he had received before. He thought of Rowan, of Nara, of the clockmaker, of every quiet destination. None of them had merely shown him extraordinary places. They had quietly changed the way ordinary moments felt. A lantern, a cup of tea, gentle rain, paper boats, silent reeds. None of them would ever seem ordinary again. The mist continued lifting. Soon, the magnificent entrance hall of the hidden library stood peacefully before them. Towering bookshelves stretched upward beyond sight. Warm lanterns glowed between endless balconies. Soft staircases curved gracefully through the vast open space, like rivers flowing through the heart of the library itself. Nothing had changed, and yet everything felt different. The library itself seemed to recognize him, not with words, not with magic, only with the quiet familiarity reserved for someone returning home after a long, beautiful journey. The blossom lantern hanging beside Elias slowly dimmed, not because its light had faded, because it no longer needed to guide him here. He had found his own way. Almost instinctively, Elias rested one hand upon its smooth silver handle. "Thank you." The words were barely louder than a whisper. Yet somewhere high among the endless shelves, one tiny lantern answered with a warm golden flicker. Then another, until quiet waves of welcoming light spread gently throughout the vast library. No applause, no celebration, only the peaceful acknowledgement that another traveler had returned, carrying more kindness than when he had first departed. Elara remained beside him, watching the golden lanterns awaken one after another. She smiled very softly, almost to herself. "I knew you would." For the first time, Elias noticed there was no longer any sadness in her eyes, only peace, the kind of peace that belonged to someone whose own journey had quietly reached exactly the place it had always been meant to reach. The golden lanterns slowly returned to their gentle stillness. One by one, their warm reflections settled peacefully across the polished cedar floors of the hidden library. Nothing celebrated Elias's return. Nothing needed to. The library had never welcomed travelers with excitement. It welcomed them with recognition, as though quietly saying, "You have come home carrying something beautiful." Elias stood in silence for several moments. His eyes wandered upward through the endless galleries, where countless books rested beneath warm pools of lantern light. He suddenly noticed something he had overlooked during every previous return. Many of the books were changing, not dramatically, only quietly. A few new volumes now rested upon shelves that had once been empty. Others shimmered softly before settling into different places among their companions. Some covers carried symbols instead of titles: tiny lanterns, clock hands, golden apples, silver reeds, paper boats. None of them seemed arranged by author or subject or age. They seemed arranged by journeys. Elias looked toward Elara. "The library is growing." She nodded. "It always grows. New travelers." Sometimes she smiled. "Sometimes old travelers." He frowned gently. "I don't understand." She stepped toward one of the nearest shelves. Carefully, she drew out a beautifully bound book covered in deep midnight blue cloth. No title appeared upon its cover, only a tiny silver paper boat pressed gently into the leather. She offered it to Elias. He accepted it with both hands. It felt warm, almost as though someone had only just finished reading it. Slowly, he opened the first page. There were no written words. Instead, the paper held a quiet illustration: a lantern glowing beside a peaceful river. He turned the page. The clockmaker's wing. Another page. The garden of forgotten dreams. Then, the conservatory, the orchard, the observatory, the tea house between seasons, the mapmaker's hall, the valley of silent bells. Every destination appeared as a beautifully painted memory. Not every conversation, not every lesson, only the quiet moments that had gently changed his heart. He looked up in astonishment. "It's my journey." Elara smiled softly. "No, it's your remembering." He slowly turned another page. The final illustration showed only a tiny paper boat floating beneath a full moon. The page after that was completely blank. He looked at it for a long moment, then quietly laughed. "It isn't finished." "No." She looked toward the endless shelves surrounding them. "Neither are you." The words filled him with unexpected comfort. There had once been a time when unfinished things made him uneasy. Now, they felt wonderfully hopeful. A blank page no longer meant something was missing. It meant kindness still had somewhere to go. Very gently, Elias closed the book. Without thinking, he returned it to the exact place from which Elara had taken it. The moment it touched the shelf, its silver paper boat shimmered warmly. Then, beside it, another empty place quietly appeared. A space waiting for a book that had not yet been written. Elias looked toward the new empty space. He smiled, not because he wished to fill it quickly, but because somewhere, another gentle journey was already waiting patiently to become part of the library's endless story. The empty place upon the shelf remained. It was no larger than the width of a single book, yet somehow it felt as vast as the endless sea itself. Elias stood before it quietly. There had once been a time when an unfinished shelf might have felt like a responsibility. Now, it felt like an invitation, not demanding, never impatient, simply waiting with the same peaceful confidence as every place the hidden library had ever shown him. He gently traced one finger across the smooth cedar shelf. "It doesn't expect me to hurry." Elara smiled. The library has never hurried anyone. It knows that hurried journeys rarely become lasting ones. The words drifted softly into the lantern-lit silence. Elias thought about every destination he had visited. None had rushed to teach him. The clockmaker had never hurried the passing hours. The orchard had waited patiently for every golden moon to ripen. The tea house had never asked the seasons to change more quickly. Even the sea of paper boats, with millions of journeys upon its waters, had never appeared eager to reach tomorrow. Perhaps patience had quietly been the hidden library's oldest magic. A gentle sound echoed somewhere above. Not a bell, not footsteps, the quiet flutter of wings. Elias looked upward. High among the lanterns, a small white owl glided gracefully across the great entrance hall. Its feathers glowed softly beneath the golden light. Without making the slightest sound, it circled once above the endless shelves, then landed upon a high wooden railing overlooking the library. It remained there peacefully, watching, not guarding, simply witnessing. Elias smiled. "I've never seen one before." Elara followed his gaze. "You have." He looked surprised when, every time you returned, he blinked. "I don't remember. They are very good," she whispered, at allowing travelers to notice them only when they're ready. The little owl gently tilted its head toward Elias. Its bright silver eyes held neither curiosity nor caution, only quiet welcome. For one peaceful heartbeat, the owl slowly bowed its head. Then, with effortless grace, it lifted into the warm lantern light once more. Its white wings disappeared between the towering bookshelves until only the faintest shimmer remained. Elias watched long after it had gone. It felt. He searched gently for the right words, as though it already knew me. Elara's smile became wonderfully warm. It did. The hidden library has always known your name. She looked lovingly toward the endless shelves. It simply waited until you discovered your own. Those words settled more deeply than he expected. He had entered the library searching for extraordinary places. Yet, without realizing it, he had slowly become the traveler those places had always believed he could be. The blossom lantern glowed softly beside him. Its warm light no longer felt like something separate from the library. It felt like another heartbeat quietly belonging within it. Far ahead, between two towering shelves, a familiar doorway slowly appeared. Its carved wooden frame shimmered beneath the lantern light. The door itself stood slightly open. Beyond it, only soft silver mist could be seen. Elias smiled before anyone spoke. He no longer wondered where it would lead. Wherever kindness was needed next. The library already knew the way. The doorway waited quietly between the towering shelves. Its carved frame shimmered with delicate patterns Elias had never noticed before. Tiny lanterns, paper boats, golden leaves, silver reeds. Every journey he had taken seemed to live within the wood itself, not carved afterward, but as though the doorway had always known they would one day become part of its story. No one hurried toward it. Instead, Elara slowly turned away from the doorway. She looked back across the vast entrance hall of the hidden library. Warm lanterns glowed peacefully from gallery after gallery. Books rested patiently upon endless shelves. Somewhere in the distance, a page quietly turned by itself. The library continued breathing with the same gentle rhythm it had carried since the beginning of time. Elias noticed something in her expression. Not sadness, not hesitation. Contentment. The quiet contentment of someone who had finally reached exactly where they were always meant to stand. He looked at her. You knew this journey wasn't only for me. Her smile deepened. No, it never was. He waited. She continued softly. The sea of paper boats welcomed you because I needed to remember something too. That surprised him. You. She nodded. For many years, I believed my purpose was to guide every traveler until they no longer needed me. She looked toward the distant golden lanterns, but the sea kept trying to teach me something gentler. She laughed quietly at herself. I simply wasn't listening. Elias smiled. And what was it trying to teach you? She looked back into his eyes. That guidance is only beautiful when it also knows how to let go. The words lingered between them, gentle, honest, complete. Elias thought back through every step they had shared. She had never walked ahead of him, never solved every mystery, never chosen his path. She had simply been beside him long enough for him to discover his own footsteps. A peaceful silence followed. Then Elara reached into the sleeve of her ivory robe. From within, she drew a tiny silver bookmark. It was beautifully simple, a narrow ribbon of woven silver silk. At its end hung a tiny charm shaped like a folded paper boat. She placed it gently in Elias's hand. "This belongs in your book now." He looked down at the little bookmark. "I can't take something that belongs to you." She softly shook her head. "It doesn't. It belonged to the traveler I used to be." Her smile remained wonderfully calm. "It belongs to the one you've helped me become." For a heartbeat, Elias could think of nothing to say. He simply accepted the little silver bookmark with both hands. The paper boat charm caught the warm lantern light. For the briefest moment, it shimmered exactly like the millions of tiny boats upon the sea. Not because it was magical, because it had been given with love. The blossom lantern glowed beside him, not brighter, simply warmer, almost as though it too understood that the most meaningful gifts were never exchanged to remember the past. They were shared to quietly bless every journey still waiting ahead. Elias held the little silver bookmark carefully. Its tiny paper boat rested quietly against his palm, no brighter than the lanterns, no more extraordinary than the countless gifts the hidden library had already placed into his life. Yet somehow it felt impossible to measure, not because of what it was, because of what it carried. A quiet thank you, one that needed no explanation. For several peaceful moments, neither of them spoke. The hidden library itself seemed to honor the silence. Somewhere high above, another page gently turned. A lantern swayed almost imperceptibly, far beyond the endless shelves. The soft whisper of the sea of paper boats still seemed to linger inside the library's heart. Finally, Elara smiled. "I think this is where our paths become different." Elias looked at her. He expected sadness. Instead, he found peace, the same peaceful feeling he had watched upon the sea when two little paper boats had quietly drifted together before continuing toward different horizons. He smiled gently. "They aren't ending." She slowly shook her head. "No, they are simply becoming their own." Those words felt wonderfully true. He thought of Rowan, of Nara, of the clockmaker, of every gentle soul whose footsteps had once walked beside his. None of them had disappeared. They had simply continued, living beautiful stories of their own. And because of that, the hidden library had become larger, warmer, more alive. Elara stepped forward, not to embrace him, not to offer another farewell. She simply rested one hand lightly over her heart. Elias answered in the very same way. No promises, no dramatic goodbye, only quiet gratitude. Some goodbyes did not need to become heavy in order to become unforgettable. Elias smiled warmly at them both. I think the library chose wisely. Elara laughed softly. I think the traveler did. For the first time since they had met upon the bridge above the sea of paper boats, Elias realized something beautiful. She had never been sent to lead him. She had simply arrived at exactly the moment when two journeys needed one another. And now they no longer did. That did not make their meeting smaller. It made it complete. Elara took one gentle step backward. The warm lantern light gathered softly around her, not like magic, more like moonlight welcoming an old friend home. Behind her, between two towering bookshelves, another quiet doorway slowly appeared. Its carved frame shimmered with tiny silver paper boats. She looked toward it, then back at Elias. Whenever you meet another traveler, don't try to change their journey. She smiled. Simply help them believe they can continue it. Those were her final words, with the same peaceful grace that had carried her across the sea of paper boats. She turned, walked toward the waiting doorway, and quietly disappeared into its silver light. The doorway remained for only a heartbeat. Then it gently closed, not with a sound, only with peace. Elias stood for a long while. The blossom lantern glowed warmly beside him. The tiny paper boat rested safely within his cloak. The silver bookmark lay between the pages of his unfinished book. He smiled, not because another chapter had ended, but because another traveler had found her own beginning. Far above, one lantern slowly brightened, then another, then countless more. Their warm light spread peacefully throughout the endless hidden library until every shelf, every staircase, every quiet corner glowed like a welcoming home. Elias took a slow breath. Then, with calm footsteps, he walked deeper into the library, not searching for the next adventure, simply ready whenever kindness quietly opened the next door. And somewhere beyond the endless shelves, a single unopened doorway waited patiently, not because the library was calling him forward, but because another traveler, somewhere, would one day need someone who had learned that the gentlest journeys are never about leading the way. They are about walking beside another heart until it remembers. It already knows how to find its own. As the lanterns grow quieter and the sea of paper boats slowly disappears beneath the moon, may you carry one gentle kindness from tonight's journey into tomorrow. If these peaceful stories have become part of your evenings, your like, subscribe, and comment help keep Elias, the hidden library, and this growing family of travelers alive for everyone walking this path today, and for those who will one day discover it. Thank you for sharing another quiet journey. Sleep peacefully, and remember, somewhere beyond the noise of ordinary evenings, a lantern is already glowing, a door is already open, and the hidden library will always be waiting for you. Good night. We'll meet again inside the library.